The Cosa Nostra Commission was having a meeting in 1985. This was the highest ranking meeting in the Mafia at the time. Many of the most powerful bosses were there, and they were debating whether or not to expand the family business into new territories. The Mafia had been doing business for decades, and now they wanted more. They needed more soldiers to handle their business. And they needed more money. They had a lot of investments in Las Vegas, but they wanted to move into other areas. Like what? Well, how about Florida, right? It's kind of close to Cuba, so they could import some really fine Cuban cigars. Or maybe Pennsylvania, because, well, it's next to New York, and everybody knows that New York is one of the greatest cities in the world, except, of course, for Philly. At this meeting, there was a big discussion about which area would be best for them to expand to next. And the men talked and talked and talked. But ultimately, they couldn't agree on anything, so they decided to put it off until another day. Instead, they focused on another pressing issue, one man who had pissed them all off. See, the boss of the Gambino crime family, Paul Castellano, had gotten himself killed. He wasn't whacked by any rival gang. He wasn't killed in a war with the government. No, he was killed by his own underboss, a man named John Gotti. Gotti had taken Castellano out in front of a bunch of people, and then sat on his body until the cops arrived. It was like something out of a movie. Okay, a mobster being killed by his underboss in front of witnesses. It was unheard of. Sure, there had been power struggles within the families before, but nothing like this. This was blatant, bold, and brazen. This was also very stupid. And now the commission needed to decide what to do about it. Had John Gotti committed an act of insanity, or was this a brilliant stroke of genius? To answer this question, the commission brought in the head of the Lucchese crime family, Anthony Corallo. Now, Corallo was known as the Teflon Don. Why? Because he managed to avoid prison for his entire life. Despite the fact that he was involved in some of the biggest rackets in the United States, so the commission sent him to go talk to John Gotti and find out exactly what the hell he was thinking. What was going on in that nut's head when he decided to whack his boss? Did he know what he was getting himself into? And if so, why did he do it anyway? Now, we don't know exactly what was said between Gotti and Carlucci. After all, these were mafia meetings, and nobody leaves these things alive to tell the tale. However, we do have some educated guesses. See, Gotti didn't just murder Castellano because he felt like it. Oh no, he had some very specific grievances against the boss. First of all, Castellano wasn't much of a mover and shaker anymore. He preferred to stay in the shadows and let his underbosses take care of business. Gotti thought that he was the best guy for the job and he wanted to be running things. Then there were the disputes over money. Gotti claimed that Castellano was skimming off the top of his rackets and keeping the money for himself. Finally, there were the rumors that Castellano was a government informant. Now, that might sound crazy, but Gotti was a paranoid guy. He believed that everybody was out to get him, so it wouldn't surprise him if Castellano was working for the feds. When Corleone went to see Gotti, he probably asked him about all of those reasons. He probably wanted to know if there were actual disputes over money, or if Gotti was just making that up. He wanted to know if Castellano was really skimming money from the family. And he probably wanted to know if Castellano was a rat. If Gotti had lied to him about any of those things, Coral would have known it. After all, he'd been in the Mafia for decades. He knew how the game was played. Well, we don't know what Gotti told him, but whatever it was, Corleone must have believed him. He later told the commission that Gotti wasn't just insane, he was a dangerous liability. And since Gotti had shown that he wasn't afraid to kill his own boss, the commission feared that he would turn on them next. So they sent Gotti a message telling him that he was officially demoted back to being a caporegum. That meant that he lost his position on the commission, and he lost a significant amount of power. On top of that, he had to give up his fancy lifestyle in Manhattan and go back to being a regular guy in Brooklyn. But even though he lost his power, he still had his life. You see, the Mafia had a code. Once a member, always a member. Even if you got kicked out, you were still part of the family. So if you made a mistake, the worst thing that could happen to you was being kicked out of the organization. Sure, you might end up dead soon after that, but at least you got to live for a while, and that wasn't an option in this case. The commission had decided that John Gotti had to die. They weren't going to risk having a traitor in their midst. Gotti must have known that when he killed Castellano, took out the boss in front of witnesses. It was bound to happen. The only question was when. So where did he go to hide? Well, he didn't go far. In fact, he stayed right in his fancy Manhattan mansion. There he lived like a king for the next 2 months. He threw parties, he prostituted women, and he partied like there was no tomorrow. He was waiting for the inevitable, and when it came, it was brutal. In June of 1986, 3 guys showed up at his house. They didn't bother knocking on the door. They just kicked it down and stormed inside. One of them was a hitman named Thomas Belatti. The other 2 were bodyguards in case someone tried to interfere. Now, Gotti was expecting company that night. He'd gotten a phone call earlier saying that some important businessmen wanted to meet with him, so he was dressed in a suit ready to make some deals. When he saw the men with the guns, he knew that this wasn't a business meeting. This was a hit, so he tried to run. He tried to get away from them, but it was no use. They chased him down and shot him 6 times. He was hit in the legs, in the shoulder, and in the chest. And the last bullet blew off the top of his head. His body was thrown in the trunk of a car and driven out to a secret grave in the middle of nowhere. The hitman waited around for a while, making sure that nobody found the body. Then they went home and waited for the inevitable. You see, when a mafia boss gets killed, there's always a war that follows. Someone wants revenge. And this time it was Gotti's old crew. They weren't happy that he got whacked. They weren't even mad that he betrayed Castellano. No, they were mad that he got killed without telling them first. That's right. The Mafia has a tradition that if you're going to kill someone, you tell your crew first. That way they can get ready for the war that's coming. But Gotti didn't do that. Just took Castellano out and hoped for the best. Now that's really stupid. See? When a Mafia boss gets killed, the underbosses usually take over. Gotti had 5 underbosses, so they should have taken over his old territory. But instead, his crew kept the territory, even though they weren't loyal to him. They were loyal to the boss that he killed. So Gotti's men started a war with Castellano's men. There was fighting in the streets. There were bombs being thrown. There were even a couple of murders. It was messy. But in the end, Gotti's men won. They took over his territory, and they started making money. They were good at it, too. In fact, they became so powerful that they eventually took over the whole Gambino crime family. It all started with killing the boss.